whatever the challenges are that are before you in the areas in which you work, in the areas in which you're passionate about. So the nice thing and a gift that I feel with this approach is that it's a meta theory. It's a theory that's big enough to hold every theory, integral, Maslow's hierarchy, and it's small enough where you can use it at the individual level, intrapersonally. I'm dealing with a challenge, and I'm not feeling good about what's happening. There's probably a polarity there, or two or three, that I might be able to use this approach for to help me increase my own well-being in a way that's faster and more sustainable. I may be in an interpersonal conflict with somebody, and there might be a way to apply polarity thinking to the conflict in order to help us leverage the polarities that are there. In team development, we might be able to, we could use this to help the team at the organizational level, at the national level, at the international level. So it's got scalability. And man, do we need that. So the 5-step process, I'm just going to give it to you right out of the gate. And we didn't know what the acronym was going to be when we first came up with this. It's small. But never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed. It's the only thing that ever has. So there's all kinds of great small quotes there that we could. So we call it a small process to do big things. So what we first have to do is to see polarities as distinct from problems to solve. Then we map them out because there's a very predictable energy dynamic in play in them. And then what we can do is we can actually assess how well or poorly we're leveraging these tensions. And once we do that, we can learn, okay, now that we know where we are and how well or poorly we're leveraging it, what does that mean? We make meaning with each other. And then we start developing action steps to empower the upsides of each pole. And we develop early warning signs to keep us out of the downside. Early warning signs are the measurable indicators that say, here it goes again. We can't solve the polarity. It's inherently unsolvable. It's unavoidable. It's indestructible by its very nature. What makes it a polarity is its unsolvability. But we can leverage it. But we have to know when we're starting to over-focus on a particular pole or both poles so that we don't find ourselves in these downsides, because they are avoidable. And the upsides are attainable sustainably. So that's what we're trying to do. Now notice here that the engage key stakeholders is happening at every step of the process. It's an iterative process. You never step in the same river twice, right? See, I'm telling you things you already know. We need maps, but maps aren't the territory. But maps can really help us. They can save our lives, and they change over time. So I'm going to give you. Actually, before we do that, let's start out with an experiential. Let's just do this thing, right? So. I've done this before, but I've never done it this way. So you all are going to have some fun here. These actually are real mouse traps, in case you're wondering. All right. So we have this process called challenge by choice, which we're going to use for this exercise right now. Challenge by choice means that you don't do anything that you don't want to do, okay? And if you want to challenge yourself, you should feel welcome to do so. You're going to have to team up with these folks over here. All right, so here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to demonstrate. All right, so you can choose to be an observer, or you can choose to participate with a partner. Whoops. I told you they were the real thing. Now, the good news is the Victor company knows that people snap these on themselves when they're setting them. And they haven't been sued. Or if they have, they haven't gone out of business because of it. So, in a worst case scenario, you're not going to get killed. So, here's how this thing works. What you're going to do is you're going to choose to either observe or participate with a partner. When you're ready, here are the instructions. You're going to close your eyes. So one person is going to close their eyes. So you have to choose who's that person. And they're going to hold out their hand like this. Then there's going to be a partner who's going to take that person's hand and they're going to coordinate together to trip this mousetrap. And so the other person takes the person's hand, and when they're ready, they put their hand on the mousetrap. Then the person who has tripped the mousetrap throws it off the table. Now, you don't have to participate. If you don't participate, I want you to watch and observe what's happening, because I'm gonna ask for who the observers were, and your job is going to be to share what you observed. If you are a participant, you know what to do. You're either going to be the close the eyes hands person, or you're going to be the hand guider trap tripper. Go.
I'm willing. Someone's guide me to close my eyes. Okay.
So,
Oh, no. The directions need to be made a little bit more clear, apparently. For those who haven't done it yet, my demonstration apparently didn't quite do the trick. So, you're putting your whole hand on top of it. What you are not doing is going like this. Ow!
I got
All right, 30 more seconds and we're going to quit. 30 more seconds.
Thank you very much.
I don't know what I observed. Except that you were very methodical. Very responsive.
And I just want to get her. I can tell you.
All right. All right.
I'm sure the toilets in this room. Because he's like that toilet. I feel like I'm going to get sucked down.
You did it? Okay. Someone else want to try it real quick?
Really?
Which one do you want?
Okay. All right. You can hear me, clap your hands. All right. Good job, everyone. All right. Let's very quickly hear from who's an observer. Who's an observer? Okay. What did you notice? What were some of the just initial things that you noticed from the very beginning to the very end? Top sort of things that popped out for you.
Well, I observed this group first, and she was literally led to put her hand in the trap. But she didn't seem to at all be unnerved by that. A couple of people over here, expert guidance towards it, expert instruction, how to do it, and then I didn't notice anyone with any sort of fear involved in this. It was just basically trust that, it's going to be okay.
Great. So can I check in here, because my instructions were kind of rushed, because we are rushed, and so a lot of things coming at you at the same time, and then there was sort of a misapplication unintentional misapplication, I'm sure, of the instructions. But what happened the second time?
The second time,
We switched.
So you were a courageous one, even after the mistake, to basically say, I'm going to go for it. Okay.
well, it was pretty simple. I did my handouts, took it to the wrong thing, and kind of knew what to expect. And I knew I wasn't going to get smacked for the
Good.
we got past that.
Because you learned, you got past it because you learned from the first experience, yeah? Excellent. Any other observations anybody wants to just pop out there? Yes?
I was scared both going down and coming off.
Okay.
But I trusted my partner's guidance and
Ah.
I let me do that. But I was still
You're a little
scared.
Yeah. Ooh. New stuff going on? Yeah. Anybody, any other observations from the table?
No, it was really important for the first, I was happy that they did it because it felt like we knew each other, and it would be easier with people that knew each other than just trusting a stranger or, either way.
Yeah.
And the guiding was really, the guiding was really important. You got your hands like this, which was actually better because, you could cover a lot of territory, didn't you?
Spread out the risk.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
another thing, so trust came up, right? Another thing I heard was that you all knew each other already.
No,
there-
I didn't,
But
but I
you
know
didn't.
that, I kind of felt they did, so I was kind
Oh.
of hoping they would do the exercise because it would be a little more comfortable in a relationship.
So you
A
knew
good
you-
relationship.
So
Really
interesting.
scary about
So you knew you could actually depend on some of the trust that built up between these
Right,
two,
yeah.
which added to your trust level. It sounds like.
Right, or if I sensed animosity, like, oh, this is
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I think I feel like do it fast, quickly.
Quickly, right?
I just hold it in the fingers, not
Yeah.
palm. So that's, yeah.
But he was very, here, oh yeah, you guide my hand, no problem. You didn't have to think about it, I'll be the guy.
Excellent. Excellent. How about from the center tables here?
Well, she's the one who put her hand on it, and she was very comfortable doing it. She was game for it. And then Teresa was just very careful in how to place it.
Yeah.
So it was done very consciously. And I knew both of them, so it made it easier, but I stood in front to watch them.
Okay.
I didn't realize it was coming right in. I said, okay, but
Here it
that's kind of
comes.
surprising.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
I just was going to say, I wanted to be the person that put their hand down because I trust them so much, both my partners.
Oh, okay.
And I realized that I had more trust that they would make me safe. And I was afraid something might happen unexpected. And so I didn't want to be the one type of guy, but I took that role anyway. But I went through that, So
Yeah.
it was interesting to discover that I would trust them not to let me be hurt more than I was afraid I might not be able to prevent them from being hurt.
Oh, wow.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, How about over here? Anything?
You can still speak.
Oh, well, she's from Australia, and so when we're getting ready to go down, and she says, okay, you're 5 centimeters away.
The standards are all
That's
messed
kind
up.
of close. So I trusted her, so I went and so.
Excellent. All right. So if I would have started out this exercise saying, let me tell you how to leverage this polarity. First of all, the polarity is between safety and risk. And with safety, of course, one of the upsides is we get protection. Another upside is it contributes to our well-being and comfort. And another is that it gives us thorough consideration before we take any risks. Those are really great things about safety, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. There's probably more things that we could add too if we went around and got other people's, did some crowdsourcing here. And then I could come over here as the expert in the room and I could say, oh, the upside of taking risks or the unknown is that we get to explore new things with each other. Wow, awesome. We get to learn from each other. And we get all these new experiences. That's great stuff too, isn't it? And I'll bet you could probably think of some things to add to that list, am I right? Now, but that's not the whole story, is it? That's not everything that just happened with you, is it? No, because there was something else going on. And I could see it in your faces when I first said, here's what you're going to do. And people are like, what? If we over-focus on safety to the neglect of risk, we miss opportunities. If we over-focus on safety without risk, it contributes to a lack of learning in the extreme. If we over-focus on safety to the neglect of risk, it could, over time, lead to stagnation. We don't do anything new. Now, that's still not the whole story. There's another column here, another quadrant that we need to pay attention to. If we over-focus on risk to the neglect of safety, it could lead to some chaos and confusion. If we over-focus on risk to the neglect of safety, it could lead us to hurt ourselves or others. If we over-focus on risk to the neglect of safety, it could put us in a complete panic zone. We don't learn when we're in panic zone. We shut down because we're trying to take care of the safety pole. All this is going on at the same time, and it's overwhelming to your brain. But if we can see a more complete picture of the tension, then we can begin to think about new ways of saying, okay, I'm thinking about participating here in this challenge by choice, which is an action step to get this. It's also a high leverage action step. I gave you a challenge by choice. You don't have to participate. Okay, so I'm safe. You took care of the safety pole. But you also have the choice to participate. Okay, so that choice is out there. I'll make the decision when it's time and how to do that, depending on what I'm learning from my partners around me. So challenge by choice is what we call a high leverage action step that works for supporting the upside of both poles. That's great energy right there, okay, when we can identify what these are. Early warning signs would be if I force you to do what's not in your comfort zone, that could be an early warning sign that we're over-focusing on risk to the neglect of safety. If I force you to do what's not comfortable, one thing about early warning signs, you can't have the same early warning sign for both downsides. So if I'm forcing you to take a risk, that's an early warning sign that we're in the downside of the risk pole. What would be an early warning sign that would be in the downside of the safety pole? What would be an early warning sign? Something that you could start to observe that would say, we're starting to get these things like missed opportunity, stagnation, and lack of learning. What would be? Pardon? Boredom. Boredom would be a great early warning sign. Why am I bored? It's because I'm not trying anything new. Perfect. So I have done the same early warning sign, but that violates the rules of the math. So you can have the same action step. That's a high leverage action step, but you have to know which downside pole you're in. That's why it's measurable. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Now, if I would have just stood up here and said, this is the safety and risk polarity, blah, 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 it would have been interesting, but perhaps not as useful than actually experiencing it. Now, the other thing that's missing here is the higher purpose. One higher purpose is to create a safe and fun environment for learning early in the process. That's my higher purpose. It's also for you to have a real experience of what is a polarity. Safety and risk isn't going away anytime soon. It was there for you when you were that big, and it'll be there for you on your last days. And that's why it's a gift. It's not going away. If you try to solve the tension between safety and risk by choosing a pole as a solution, you will, over time, land yourself squarely in the downside of the overemphasized pole. Anytime, every time, all the time, over time. That's just how they work. Over-focus on risk without safety, kabam. Over-focus on safety without risk, kabam. Start oscillating negatively, on both over time, and you'll get the deepest fear, which is the result of all of these downsides contributing to some form of horrendous failure or death. But you always have a choice, don't you? Yes?
So I just want to be, so if you don't focus on both poles and have awareness of both, then you're going to quickly be into the downside. Is that?
Great point. So we're making a distinction, and we spend a half a day just on the D of distinction. That is a distinction between what is a problem to solve and what is a polarity. When we're talking about a polarity, this is the process to use for the polarity. So we're using this methodology, the small methodology, for polarities. Problems are that use either or thinking. We can't even get through our day without it. And so the first thing we're doing is saying, is this a problem to solve, or is this a polarity? Feeling this tension between risk and safety, or something else. And so the skill of identifying what is the polarity for yourself or for a group is a distinct skill too. But what we're doing today is we're understanding what's the definition of a polarity. It's an interdependent pair that needs each other over time to achieve a higher purpose. It's an interdependent pair. It shows up as a pair, like inhale and exhale. They need each other over time to achieve a higher purpose that both of the values share, and it's an energy system that is leverageable but unsolvable by its very nature. So this distinction between what's a problem to solve and what's a polarity, it's an important distinction, and it's a seldom made distinction out there, because when people experience this tension, oftentimes, for very good reasons, they immediately default to, well, it's either this or this. Which is it going to be? Well, it worked last time, must work again. This is what I do, this is how I do it. The more I do it, I get these upsides, but then I start to get into these downsides. Well, I keep doing this, I keep getting this. I keep doing this, I keep getting this, because it needs that other pole. And if you don't see it, then you're vulnerable to the downside. It can happen over here too. Risk taker, yeah, I get all these benefits. Whoops, ouch. But I'm a risk taker. That's what it's all about. That's just the price of doing business. Ouch. Yeah, I need that too. So there's an absolute predictability. One of the gifts of polarities is the predictability. You have to see them first. You have to see them first. That's why the first step is see. There's another hand over here, yeah?
This is beautiful in 2D setting. And in truth, I think there are so many polarities that it's not a 2D thing of just focusing on one, but rather the externalities that the one set of polarities can create on another set of polarities, and on and on and on.
Sure.
So, is there a meta matrix where you can create an ecosystem and map the health of the ecosystem?
Yes. And that's actually what I'm, at one level, most excited about talking about, but we gotta go slow to go fast. Here's the answer. There's a tool, a technology tool, where you can choose polarities out of the library, because we know how they work. We've seen them 100 times. We put the maps through. Oh, sorry. We whispering to create. So we have a library of polarity maps in a technology tool, all of which have gone through survey research and validation that clients can cherry pick based on their particular needs, and they can leverage or track or measure up to 8 at a time for project management, 360 feedback for leaders, strategy, it's a very versatile tool. Now, maybe the particular polarity that the group is struggling with is not in our library because it's so unique to them. they can go through the process that we just did, map it out, figure it out, what are the upsides, and we can drop that, we can drop this right here into our assessment tool, and then this becomes a question on a survey. How often do you experience or observe this group actively exploring? Almost always, almost never, sometimes, whatever. And everybody answers the survey. How often do we experience protection and care for each other in our groups? Almost always, often, seldom, almost never. The survey comes back, and what you learn is the infinity loop right here shows that you're getting some, all, or very little of the upsides here, or almost always these things, or almost never these things, or sometimes these things, or sometimes these things, or sometimes these things. That's why balance for a polarity is very suboptimal performance. It's C-average stuff. It's mediocre. We're sometimes getting this, sometimes getting this. We're also sometimes getting this, sometimes getting this. It's suboptimal. What we want is the way this loop looks and the way this loop looks. We want to intentionally, choicefully minimize the downsides, maximize the upsides, and we can do it for multiple polarities simultaneously that the particular group is engaged in. We know that particular polarities show up in healthcare as we deal with those people and they tell us these are them. Education reform. Oh yeah, these are them. And there's a few extras here we'd like to add. Family businesses. You get the drift. Okay, so yes. And I'll show you some examples of results if we can get there. Not that you're holding me up, I'm just saying I want to get there and we have to go at the great speed. Other questions? Yes?
Could you just repeat your definition?
A polarity is an interdependent pair that need each other over time to achieve a higher purpose that both of the values share. They show up as a pair, just like inhale and exhale. The reason why I use the inhale and exhale metaphor is not to insult your intelligence. It's because the feedback loop is so short that if you don't take care of the upsides of both inhaling and exhaling on a pretty short cycle, you're in big trouble really fast. So the smartest people that I deal with on the planet, the top 150 people at United Technologies Aerospace Systems, double PhD rocket scientists, literally, will not argue that you need inhale and exhale and whether one is better than the other. They get it. And then we can start to move out from there. How about activity and rest? About a 24-hour cycle. Okay, now we're taking the splash, and now we're watching the ripples. Yeah, interdependent pair that need each other over time to achieve a higher purpose. They're unsolvable, but they're leverageable. Any other quick questions? Yes.
Just another example of someone trying to explain polarities to me was the sun and the moon. They don't fight each other. It's just like breathing, and which I kind of liked.
Yeah, it's, you got to meet people where they are. And if they're in a space where they're saying, oh, the electromagnetic connection between the two, they need each other to exist, and they rotate around, and that really works for them.
Yeah.
But it may not work at United Technologies Aerospace System, or maybe it would. You got to, what I love to do, is I love to get out there and say, which is better? And you'd be surprised how long they'll sit there and debate it. And they will. Well, with inhale, you're getting oxygen. They're not thinking of it as the and. You frame it as an either or, because that's how these things show up. Am I going to safety or risk? Inhale or exhale? Well, with inhaling, you clearly
get oxygen. Yeah, but wait, hold on, Frank. You're just gonna end up there. I think exhaling is better, because if you don't get rid of the poison in your body, then you're gonna die. And then, so I think you're wrong. Well, not so fast there, Joe. You're gonna get a lack of oxygen if you just exhale. Well, that's better than not. It's better than having the poison in you. And then we'll sit there and go back and forth. Actually, that could go on forever. When you turn a polarity into a problem to solve, there are two right answers. Here's one right. This is bad, that's good. This is bad, that's good. We can literally go on all day. When you try to turn a polarity into an either or, it immediately kicks off a vicious cycle. And you'll fail to survive with this one if you choose one for too long. So that's real easy to see. We just put this map around it. Now, one thing that the rookie mistake here that everyone makes when they first learn about polarities, we have a very tight definition that they're interdependent pairs. Now, these pairs are either both neutral or both positive. So you can't put rigidity and flexibility as poles. It wouldn't work. Why? They both have to be both neutral or both positive. So rigidity is probably not positive or neutral. It's got to be down here somewhere. So let's just say it's in the downside. So what would be the other pole? If flexibility is one pole, what might be the other pole that would be kind of like exhale or inhale? Flexibility and routine. Yeah, routine in a positive sense. Now, someone over here could say, I think routine's horrible. Every time I get into a routine, I feel like I'm going like this. Okay, well, so is going like this what you're talking about? No, it's not. What are you talking about?
Habit or
Positive
ritual.
Yeah, positive ritual. Yeah. So does that work for you? Positive ritual instead of routine? Yeah. Okay. So now we're engaging key stakeholders around what's this other pole. Now, if I'm just working with you as a client, I'm coaching you as a client, I don't need his help. If ritual works for you, then that's what we use, as long as it's neutral or positive to you. And now we can start mapping it, you and me, and we can start rolling through it. And that map means something to you, and you're off and running. When we engage more people, more stakeholders, like a team, around mapping, we can slow down a little bit. Okay, so what are the poles? Flexibility and routine, okay? Now, it doesn't work for me. This is where resistance shows up. We're having a conversation about it. We finally agree, well, it's something like structure. Okay, that works. Now we're off and running, and we can go. The bigger the organization, the more you got to slow down. Make sure everyone engages on the map. So, by the way, in the literature, these things are being referred to in various ways in the last several decades. Dichotomies, Myers-Briggs, you've probably heard of dichotomies. Myers-Briggs 4 polarities. This is why you're going to love this stuff. A lot of the models and tools that you already use, you can just retrofit them into the polarity map. Myers-Briggs, extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, judging, perceiving. I got them all mapped. You can have my maps. You can assess a team using my maps tool. I mean, my tools, but we've got it available. They're calling it paradox, wicked problems, adaptive challenges, opposite strength. Jim Collins in Good to Great calls them tensions. Charles Hampton Turner in the UK, if anyone's heard of Charles Hampton Turner, he's written like 25 books on dilemmas, or on cultural tensions, masculine, feminine, individualist, collectivist, etc. Competing values framework out of University of Michigan with Robert Quinn and Jeff DeGraff and Ivan Bekor. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Anyway, they've done a lot of research on it, probably some of the best. They only choose a few polarities so they can study them. So it doesn't really cover the ubiquity of the energy systems that are out there. Deloitte Touche calls them contradictions. They're starting to write about it. Harvard calls them dualities now. Anyway, we call them polarities. Dr. Johnson's been calling them polarities for almost 40 years now. He's been developing the polarity map. and the principles, and then we created the tool to help individuals and teams and organizations to figure out what polarities might be at play in their system to help them to see and leverage them more effectively. So what we're going to do right now, and I apologize for not pausing more and not taking more questions, just I'm aware we've got a half an hour left. What I want for all of you is, we've already done it for one polarity, but I want to do it for another one, start to finish, taking you through the small process. And so I'm gonna beg and plead for you to just steamroller on this thing. And we're gonna go start to finish. I'm gonna show you, actually, this will be our challenge. I'm gonna show you how fast we can map a polarity, start to finish. Which is better, activity or rest? The answer, when a polarity is framed as a problem to solve, is always yes. Jim Collins talks about that as the genius of the and he talks about avoiding the tyranny of the or. The tyranny of the or is that there's a right answer for everything, which is an over-focus on either-or thinking to the neglect of both and thinking, which puts you in polarization. When you try to turn a polarity into a problem to solve, polarization is a result. So, you got to know when to put an and there. And by the way, you don't make it a polarity by putting an and there. Gosh, I want to buy a car. Do I choose the purple one, the green one, the yellow one, or the orange one? It's a polarity. No, it's not. It's a problem to solve. It's a problem to solve. You're going to choose one. You're going to move on. And if you choose purple, you don't have to choose red later. Sometimes a scar is just a scar. So, put activity in the left pole and rest in the right pole. And now I want you to think for yourself. And I don't care what you choose to focus on. It could be physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. I don't care. But look at the text in the upside of this box. This is your cheat sheet. What are the positive results of focusing on the left pole of activity? And just put them right above the circle. Not in the action steps. I'll give you another map if you want one. So use your map. Not in the action steps. You're going to put it right up here, right above the oval. So you got activity, and right above the oval, you're going to put as many things you can think of in the next 10 seconds. Upsides of focusing on activity. Upside benefits. When you're really getting the results of this, what does it give you? Now, there's no one right way to fill out a polarity map. I'm taking you through one option right now. I will just tell you, if you're facilitating a group that's highly charged or has a high emotional charge around a particular polarity, you might want to start with both upsides. We'd be glad you did. So you would then move over to the upside. What were the upside benefits of focusing on rest? That way, everybody who's in the room gets acknowledged early for the benefits of their particular pole preference. So, when you're getting the benefits of rest, what does it give you? What are the positive results? All right. Now, here's where it gets fun. And, by the way, this language, in case you didn't notice, when I was going through safety and risk, I was repeating this process. If you over-focus on this pole to the neglect of this pole, that language is right down here on your map. Please use it. If you love activity, and your preference in these two poles is for activity, let's just say it is. If I ask you, what are the downsides of activity? You're you're not even going to be able to think of anything. Outside of activity? Hello, activity is good. Now, if I ask you, what are the downside results of an over-focus on activity to the neglect of rest? You have to do something different with that question. And you will come up with different downsides. And so the quality of the downsides are going to be impacted by how well that question is asked. So when I have groups go through a polarity as a team, one of the things that I do is I actually take this language and I put it right on a flip chart. So the way we do this is we put a flip chart at the top of the room, two flip charts, and two flip charts at the bottom of the room. The flip charts down here say, what are the negative results of an over-focus on this right pole, whatever it is, and the left pole, same thing over here. And then this flip chart says, what are the outside benefits of focusing on this pole? All right, so it saves you from having to say the words. All right, so now, if you over-focus on activity to the neglect of rest, what does it lead to? Think about a couple things. First things that come to mind, pop them out. Bam, bam, bam. You've been there before. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Some of you are already way ahead of me. Awesome. When you over-focus on activity to the neglect of rest, okay? Now, whatever those things are, I want you to notice something. They're the opposite of what's in the thing you already filled out, the upside of rest. If you look at that diagonal, the stuff that you just put down here, it's probably the exact opposite of what's up here, or pretty close. Now, the question is, if you over-focus on the stuff that's right here to the neglect of that other pole, what does that lead to? And pop those things out. Over-focus on rest to the neglect of activity. What happens? I rest, I rest, no activity. I rest, no activity. Okay. Now, what's happening is we're being very organic about how to identify what those things are by just asking the question, what happens when you over-focus on rest and neglect of activity? But what I can also tell you, because the beauty, one of the gifts of this dynamic is that it's also very predictable that this is the exact opposite of up there, or pretty close. Now, if we had time, and what my plan was, which is why I came in here and did this loop, was I wanted your tables to talk about your maps, and to share information, and to share similarities and themes that came up, because I know that they're there. And you could share those, you could say, oh, I said the same thing, I had the same words. Well, I had this too. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. Oh, that's a good one too. I'm gonna steal that. So now, what's happening is in your group, you're getting a shared knowledge of how this dynamic works. And you're learning from each other. You're engaging with each other. Now, I can also ask, when you get the benefits of both upsides, what does it contribute to? So now we got this whole map filled out. And when you're getting both of these things, what's the greater purpose? Anybody want to throw something? Pardon?
Evolution.
Evolution, okay. Anything else come to mind?
Effective action.
Effective action, yeah. Healthy lifestyle.
Sustained well-being.
Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, so you can see how the greater purpose is going to be determined by the people, the key stakeholders who are experiencing the tension. Now, this is also up there. The greater purpose statement. Why leverage this polarity? Why even pay attention to this thing? Okay, so it's to be physically healthy. The deeper fear is the opposite. Okay, so now what we can do is I can say, you group and you group talk to each other and talk about your themes. You all do the same thing, you all do the same thing. and you're going to notice some of the similarities. Then I could say, come on up here, everybody. Let's come on up here to the upside of activity. I got this flip chart. And let's talk about some of your themes. What were some of the themes that came up? Well, all of us said increase endurance. Yeah, we had that too. What else did you have? Now we're getting the collective experience. This is just a wisdom organizer, okay? Just a wisdom organizer, jeez. The polarity map is a wisdom organizer, and that's a big thing. It's a really big thing. These experiences did not appear out of thin air. People have been here, they've been here, they've been here, they've been here. And sometimes the experiences of these things really cause some havoc and get in our way. They're so horrible that it makes the even the contemplation of going to the other pole almost too much to even think about. All right, so this is the, if we were to assess how we were doing as a group, one thing we could do is I could send out a survey with the contents of the map, and you would answer. Notice how the scale flips on the bottom, because you don't want these things on the bottom. That's why almost always getting those things would be a bad thing. So you almost always getting those things, oof, out. Almost always getting these things would be a good thing. So you could actually probably right now on your map just do put a little check mark, high to low, on how often you're getting those things in each column. And if you did that, what would happen is you'd be assessing yourself 0 to 100 in each category here, each quadrant, on how well or how poorly you're doing. So if I rated myself here, how well or poorly would I be leveraging that polarity? %, 0, 0, 0. So if I've got potential of 400, I just scored 100. That's not very good. 100, 0 to 100 here would be like right there. And by the way, if I do this too long, I will get my fear is that I'm going to atrophy if I don't exercise. So now I over-exercise. Now what happens is I have broken my leg, and now I'm actually down here. I can't, I can't even work out. And so now, because I can't work out, this is starting to happen. And depending on how badly I kill my leg, now I'm here. Actually, Barry Johnson, the man whose life work contributed to this wisdom I'm passing along, his son qualified for the Boston Marathon 4 times. He only ran it 3 times. The 4th time, he tried to beat his other 3 times, and he overtrained. He overtrained so hard that, and he tried to trudge through it, that when he ended up here and went to the doctor said, "You have the worst hairline shin fractures in both legs that I've ever seen in my years as a sports doctor. And if you try to run the Boston Marathon, you will break both legs before you're halfway through. You will not finish. And by the way, you're laid up for a year." So now he is fixing himself. So make no mistake, this is all about high performance. Sustainable high performance. Yeah.
Can you just give an example, when you do this in a workplace, the type of an example of polarity you would do in a workplace?
Sure. Help me out. Friends who work in organizations. I know you're thinking of the ones in your workplace. So tell me what goes on in your workplace, and let's help out here. What's your name?
Eleni.
Let's help the lady out here. Come on. Both neutral, both positive. I can tell you, but I'm not going to do that. And I can tell you some of the most common ones. But what are some ones that are just bubbling up for you right now? You're sitting here thinking, well, in my workplace, I think it might be something like, come on, let's just experiment. We'll help you out. How do they show up? Yeah.
I think workaholic. I think anybody just is nothing but, 14-hour day working.
Yeah. So activity and rest kind of shows up in the workplace in terms of a challenge and support or something like that. Or I don't know what you want to name the polls, but it's there. What else?
Maybe a technical, non-technical.
All right. So one thing, when we name the polls, we don't just want to say this, not this. So when we say not this, when we say non-technical, what are we talking about? So technical and
Maybe administrative or something,
administrative, okay, yeah, there you go. So oftentimes we'll experience a real tension between the people who are doing the technical work. In a law firm, it's the lawyers. And when I was at the Washington Post, it was the people in the newsroom. And then there's everybody else who are supporting me, right? And by the way, the newspaper doesn't end up on people's front patio without circulation people, without the advertising people, without all these other people. So, yes, but there's a technical tension, and then there's the support, technical support. So we see it with field and home office.
Yeah.
These are all variations of part and whole, by the way. And you got the part and whole in my presentation. And the part and whole polarity is very predictable. The upside of part, every part, the technical people, they want freedom, uniqueness, and initiative. And the organization needs equality, connectedness, and synergy. But guess what? HR also wants freedom, uniqueness, and initiative too. And HR is part of the whole, which needs equality and connectedness. So what happens is it's no accident that in a healthcare system, the people providing patient care go right up against the people who are counting the money. So we need these new machines to serve the patients. That's what we're doing here. Yeah, we're not going to be doing it wrong if the organization doesn't survive, because we're spending money we don't have. So we got to make some hard choices here. You're impacting the patients. You're impacting the organization negatively. You're impacting the patients. All of a sudden it's either or. Money, patient care. Money, patient care. When we map that out, people providing patient care could see that the people focusing on the margin for the organization had an important point of view, because they weren't going to get a paycheck for long if the organization didn't survive. The margin-focused people recognized a little bit more what the challenges were on the front line of patient care and what their most important needs were. And when they could come together around the tension and not vilify and create drama triangles about how bad each other is, they would recognize that they both contribute to very important goals for the organization, which, if I remember correctly, was something around providing a great place to give and receive care. Sustainable. And they can minimize the downsides. When I was at a bank, the loan salespeople were right up against the risk management people. Every time we bring a loan to you, you say no. You're bringing loans to us that are going to get us in trouble. Who's right? Yes. They both contribute to an important aspect of the organization, which is survival by compliance with rules that are set up to protect people in society and the bank. And the loan. So the loan salespeople need to sell loans to keep the bank viable and to provide a service to customers, because they need to borrow money to start their businesses. But they can't just loan to everybody or they get in trouble. If they do loan to everybody, they overfocus on risk and they end up in trouble. So that would be the downside of over-focusing on loan sales to the neglect of risk. If you say no to everything because you're so scared, because the rules aren't clear, and you're saying no to everything without any debate whatsoever, then you've got no loans in the pipeline and the bank's going to fail. And the rules aren't set up, the intention to have everybody fail and to undermine the economy. So it's easy to over-focus on risk out of fear. And so there's a legitimate fear there. There's also a legitimate fear that I'm not going to meet my numbers and targets as a loan salesperson. So these two groups immediately, just because the energy of the system, get pitted with one another. And if it's an either or, it's a train that's coming right at each other. Okay? The downside of this, upside of this, downside of this, upside of this, it gets positioned just like this, just like two trains coming, right? And if you've only got an either or mindset, then you got a crash waiting to happen. Now, what happens though is if you can see this as a polarity, and if there's a legitimate downside, a legitimate upside, you can leverage this, but not go too far down here, and you can tap into this for all these good reasons, but it's not a solution. We're not going to go too far down here. That conversation is usually not the conversation that's happening. It's, which is it? And my boss says it's this. My boss says it's this. Well, we'll see you in court, or at the water cooler. Yeah.
This is brilliant in the frame of the enterprise to map polarities, as you said. But what about the field in which the enterprises operate? For example, this already can do a lot of the healthcare that the enterprise that you're describing is trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
So it's in all of our interests to allow for disruptive breakthroughs, the innovators, the disruptions.
Sure.
So how beyond the frame of the enterprise, if we're talking about a field of emergence, the commons, and the future that we want to see, how do we create the polarity map for ensuring that these enterprises don't lock up and lock in on something that's way...
That's the word. That's the word, my friend. It's the work we're doing to build a better world. And it's not easy. Do not underestimate the power of either or thinking for 1 minute. First of all, it's necessary and useful. It's not our enemy. If we can put either or thinking in service of polarities, that is the new world. But the problem is, because of the power of either or thinking, it works when you use it. 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. 2 + 2 is 5. You know what's correct and what's incorrect. Look at how clear that is. I want that same clarity for everything like that. It doesn't work the same way for that. But you can align the data to make it work if you're skillful at aligning the data in an either or way. So that's why I'm on this planet right now there's lots of multipliers out there. I do executive coaching because leaders of organizations and businesses have more power on the planet than anybody. If you can get to leaders, which executive coaches have access to, and some of them, good ones, are coaching 10, 20 leaders at a pop, and you can start to influence their thinking by making this mitosis, a distinction between problems and polarities, and they do what I call the V8 moment, and they say, I'm going to be stuck unless my team sees this, because they're the ones having the argument, and it all ends up here. Can you take my team through this? Now we just did the splash. Now we got the next ripple in the pond. What do you think that executive team says when they go through the same process? My team's fighting me. Now you're going to the next level system. Now you got an OD, organization development, large-scale systems change project on your hands. It started with an enlightened leader. So it doesn't always have to start with a leader, but the more people who can see the distinction between what's a problem solved and what's a polarity, the easier your job is in mapping and leveraging it and achieving, because you don't have the same arguments anymore. Once you see how a polarity works, you can't unsee it. You've got new eyes for the tension. You don't have the same either or arguments. You basically know that, yeah, I hang out here, and I got a legitimate truth. I want this, I hate that. So that energy is, and there's a truth to it. I also know that because I love this thing, I'm vulnerable to the downside of my preferred pole. And when I'm here, it's just a price of doing business. I mean, that's kind of, really? I mean, better than that. So it's easy to say, yeah, this is me, that's not me, that's Jack. Jack is a piece of shit. I'm not. This is bad, but Jack's worse. Okay? Now, Jack is over here saying, hey, come on. I hate that. That's Joe. Yeah, there's some of this going on, but at least it's not Joe. Joe's a piece of shit, by the way. Okay? So now, Jack's a piece of shit and Joe's a piece of shit over something that is inherently unsolvable. When Jack and Joe both see how the energy dynamic works, they realize, oh, I got a piece of the truth. And yeah, I am willing to over-tolerate this from time to time. Same thing.
There's been a lot of talk about moving from dual ways of thinking to triadic ones.
Yeah.
And so if when we're to make a polarity map of polarity maps,
yeah,
where is the edge? Where is the downside of using polarity maps too much? For example,
perfect question. I know where you are. Okay. And just in the interest of time, because it's got 2 minutes left, and I got my script to finish. You got to be careful. Like people like me, people like you, need to be careful. Once you get a taste of this, you'll see how well it works in organizations. You get this kind of, excitement, legitimate excitement about it, that people can see things in new ways, and we're all about helping people, right? And so and this is where either or thinking now starts to creep into your own. So now everything's a polarity. So now you're over focusing on both and thinking to the neglect of making some real choices and moving and doing some stuff. So you have to keep the benefits of either or thinking and both and thinking in mind. One of the ways we do that is we prioritize. What are the most important polarities for this leader, for this team, for this organization right now? It's going to change over time. And once you get good at them, once you start leveraging them, they kind of fade off into the background. Something else will pop up. They're like at whack-a-moles. Now, that doesn't mean that went away. It just means you're leveraging it more, and it's no longer in your sort of field of whatever. But asking the question is an either-or choice. What are the polarities we need to pay attention to right now? And kind of limiting them, and making hard choices around that at that particular point in time. I just wish we had more. I hate ending here.
I have one question.
Yes.
For the systems engineering, we do trade-offs.
Yes.
And that there are the similar things going, you pick the items, like you build the spacecraft and what voltage you use. And all those things, you do the trade-offs. And what's the difference in that?
Well, the difference on a trade-off on an either-or problem to solve is you're making a decision among multiple choices that are independent of one another. Now, that may be happening where you're thinking you're solving every problem, and there are multiple polarities there. And if you think you're solving the problem when it's a polarity, you're going to get they're actually the trade-offs will pop up because you can't solve the polarity. And so that's why knowing what are the polarities there and what are the problems, because the problems actually do go away once you solve them. When we come up with an action step, who's going to do what by when in service of this pole or that pole, those are problems to solve, and there are trade-offs. Do we choose Jack or Joe? Jack will be the best person for this job. Okay, good. What about this pole? We're going to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. We need this team to deploy on this project. Who's going to do it? What's the time frame? That's all problem solving in service of one or more polarities. So I think the assumption is a lot of times that everything's a problem to solve, and there are just these trade-offs. And what's happening is, within the trade-off, if it's a polarity, you're basically accepting that there are downsides of the choice when it doesn't have to be. So you're accepting unnecessarily if everything's a problem to solve. So we're going to have to stop there in the questions. What I'm going to ask you for is two things. Number one, I just want to tell you why I chose the title of this presentation, Seeing is Loving. And the other thing I'd like to tell you one last story about my sister with this polarity as a way to end. And it'll take me 5 minutes. So we can go over by 5 minutes. Is that okay? You're welcome to okay. I chose this title because, and I'm still kicking myself that I never mentioned this when Laura and I were doing our presentation on Thursday night. When you leverage a polarity or multiple polarities in a system, there's more love in the system. There just is. You cannot achieve leverage in the absence of love. It's either love for yourself or it's love for yourself in the context of others. But the only way to achieve both upsides in these tensions is through an increased level of seeing both yourself and others more completely. So that's why seeing is the first step, and seeing is loving. And if we could see these tensions that are often create these drama triangles and the hatred that's out there more completely, we would love our enemies. All right, so that's that. Now, here's my sister. Her name is Lori, and she is my hero. She suffers from an incurable form of cancer. But she doesn't let that get in her way. She was a marathoner before her diagnosis, and she's a marathoner now. She basically said, I'm going to continue to live my life with cancer. So, just like your map, she did her map. Some of her action steps in training for a marathon as she runs further each day. She makes sure there's adequate downtime between workouts. Just trying to give you a sense of the action steps and early warning signs here. Early warning signs, she has to pay very close attention to her energy. Because if she's too sore to work out, or she doesn't listen to her body, she has to pay very close attention to that, and she can get in trouble faster than most of us. That's an early warning sign, so she really pays attention to that. And she's an executive. She started a foundation that pairs cancer patients with cancer survivors, because it was a missing element for her. So she started a foundation, so she's an executive, and she basically runs, so she's finding herself too busy to work out or skipping workouts. That's an early warning sign that she's over-focusing on rest and neglected activity. So these are just a couple of things, those are the leveraging, that's problem solving in service of the polarity. So, this is just an example of what her map would look like. If you were putting action steps and early warning signs in your map would be very unique for you. And it should be. We're not all the same. So this is her now. What happened is she started to get this pain in her hip. And it's actually her upper hip. And so they were saying, well, we need to watch that. We hope it's not cancer or recurrence. And so they watched it, got bigger, the pain got worse, she couldn't train. And they said, Lori, we're really sorry, we're gonna have to go in and operate. But it's really dangerous to operate there for women because there's so much that can go wrong. But we gotta do it. So they went in, the good news was, it wasn't cancer. Bad news was, she woke up in recovery without use of her left leg. So she wakes up in recovery paralyzed on her left leg. And so for the next 16 months, she's learning how to walk again. I've watched her walk the first time. It was great. The second time, not so much. It was really painful. And so overnight, her higher purpose went from running a marathon to learning how to walk again. So you can see how the polarity doesn't go away. As a matter of fact, the upsides and downsides stay pretty consistent with the marathoning. It's just the action steps and the early warning signs because of the new strategy around the new situation that she had no part in creating. It was just the external world just kind of landed on her. She had to do things differently. And so she started doing those things differently. And she told me, she said, Cliff, on my map, the hardest thing was sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning and going to my physical therapist. And she said, I just figured, what the fuck? I mean, I got cancer, I'm trying to do the good thing, you know, and run my life and lead my life, and now this happens, and I'm learning how to walk again, and the world has just dealt me a really bad hand. And I just feel like, why even try anymore? It doesn't matter anymore. She said, when I find myself there and I hear myself saying those words, that's when I know I need to get out that door and to get to Matt, on his map. So, over time of this, and you know, when she's marathoning, like it's activity every day, and then it's rest, and then it's activity and rest for about 3 months until she could run, you know, a 10K. For this, it was very much a focus on rest. She said she'd go to Matt on Tuesday and Thursday, and she was exhausted. Like worse than when she was training for the marathon, she was exhausted just trying to lift her leg off the table and move her toes. And then she's using a walker in a pool up to her chest. And then she's using a walker in a pool up to her waist because the buoyancy takes. And then she's just using a walker on the ground. And then she ditches the walker and she's using a cane, ditches a cane. And then she's walking on her own, and now she's running marathons again. It took a couple of years, but this picture was taken after this picture.
Whoa.
At the finish line of a marathon. So the major takeaway I want you all to have about polarities is she's an inspiration to a lot of people with cancer. It's how we show up in these tensions. I mean, there's no way to measure it, how important it is. So think about how we show up for others in these tensions and how we help them to see it more completely. Even when people are invested deeply in one goal, how can we hold a space for them to acknowledge their value and fear and help them walk through the tension in a way that's different from your wrong? Because being right in a polarity is too easy, and being wrong in a polarity is too easy. There are two rights and two wrongs. And so, in one respect, it can be very liberating to kind of let go that we have to solve it. And it also puts a lot of responsibility on all of us, particularly those of us who can see and leverage these tensions to be able to hold that space for people who have legitimate values and fears. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And thank you for the extra time that you've given me to tell this story. And I'll be happy to provide all these slides, which will include the measurement stuff, which will also include a whole list of polarities from businesses and organizations and everything that you want. If you send me an email, and you know how to contact me, I will inundate you with information. I love it all. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we got one last exercise. Yeah, that was